Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host in the Northern American Continental Experiential McNulty.
I don't even know what that means. Great to see you, Mark, and Happy New Year, by the way, to you and to our audience.
Thank you very much. Yeah, from this Northern Hemisphere, maybe we'll get, once Chris describes who we're talking to, what all of his talk across hemispheres, but across all hemispheres, Happy New Year to you as well, Chris.
So today, we're going to hear from three IT pro experts from Australia, which is definitely in the Southern Hemisphere, since I flew over the equator to go there once upon a time. We'll be chatting with Brett Moffet, the solution architect at Cireson, Matt Cline, enterprise architect at Data Number 3, and Andrew Young, solution specialist at Subnet. All are coming from the great IT pro community for Microsoft in Adelaide.
So you're going to hear us chat around solutions from their SharePoint architect perspectives. This covers managing hybrid deployment, migrating to the modern stack in the cloud at scale, and their recommendations for IT pros to learn more and to actually get certified. We dig into a lot of things about their best practices, their opinions, and more. Chris, when we think about not only Australia, you crossing the equator, which is something I want to hear a little bit more about, what do you think of when you think of the role of the architect in the context of SharePoint? What first comes to mind?
Well, the thing is, it means different things to different people. Traditionally, you could have spent a ton of time in SharePoint architecture just designing your server farm, any replication architectures, what does the database structure need to be, looking at the disk subsystems. And the nice thing about Microsoft 365 is those problems are pre-solved for you. And so you can really focus on a couple of different aspects. And certainly information architecture is a key one. And we can come back on that. But I think solution architecture is probably the broader and in many ways the more fascinating discipline, because it's not just looking at the really important way of how do we structure information across libraries and metadata and sites to make it useful and intuitive to people. And that's a valuable discipline, but really looking at not just how does SharePoint itself work, but everything around it. The rest of M365, partner solutions, what's happening with the roadmap, and to be able to listen to a set of needs, which may not even be technical needs, and translate that into that high-level approach of, you can do this here, you should bring that tool in for this, and we're going to have to build it, but if you can wait 3 months, this is going to be coming down the road.
Yeah, being able to articulate the outcome, and that is an architecture layer all of its own based on a lot of the customer requirements and what they really want to accomplish once they are in that end state. But a lot of what you said also is the getting there and knowing how to get there, knowing either available tools for Microsoft, the right partners to engage, and that might be, for various components, not for the entire project. But knowing end to end, I love what you just said, kind of in that realm of the art of the possible. Tell me what you want as an outcome, and I'll tell you the truth based on, what it is that I know at a very deep level.
I remember, years ago when I was back in Boston, my friend Rob Garrity, who was an architect at Gensler, which is a global architecture firm. And on this one project that he was working on with us, which is redesign of a floor downtown, he was working with a design counterpart, and his design counterpart sketched something where every office inner wall was totally glass, and there was no structure, no place for electricity, no place for shades or anything. And the designer said, you have the design, now you need to kind of translate that into reality. And so Rob explained, you have to go in and understand the strength of glass and how much torsion goes on from a door, and where do I need to think about putting shades and what the structure going to be, and do we need electricity, and is this going to impede or airflow, and all the different things in the physical realm. And there, I think, are analogs to all of that in the digital and the SharePoint realm. How is search going to happen if we put all the information in a non-SharePoint repository for structured data over here, whether it's Dataverse or some other third-party partner solution. Will people who stroll by my application understand what it does and how to enter, or are they going to need instructions? All of the different things that you need to consider, the different users and stakeholders are going to come through your space. One of Rob's colleagues said to me once, architecture is fascinating, physical architecture, because you're going to construct a space, and because of the way you put the door and the floor and the places where things are, people will meet and have conversations that will never happen if you had structured it a different way. And some people will trip, and some people have moments of great inspiration. And as an architect, you never really get to see all that. It happens after the fact. And in solutions architecture, it's really sort of the same thing. Like you may hear some feedback afterwards, but because of the choices you make, there are some things that may never happen, and hopefully you're preventing bad things from happening. And many unanticipated good things should happen. You just need to be able to create a structure that allows it to be not just dynamic today, but dynamic moving forward. So even if someone comes in with a mindset that's like, I have just found something that's going to be awesome. It's a new tool I just read about called InfoPath. Being able to sit down and say, this is not a new tool. This is something which is which is on a path towards being sunset. And there are more flexible ways to approach this. You can definitely use it today, but you'll be probably needing to rewire it in the next several years anyway.
One of the big parts of the role, and I have this image of now, what is the structure of glass in the cloud? Thank you for that visual. But I think also the role of the architect is to know what's possible, but to also know when to question, do you really want to do that? Because the outcome will lead to X or Y, which may not be a positive outcome. And I see it a lot just as one example through a lot of migration efforts. We have this file server or file server set. We've got SharePoint. We've got other repositories, and they may be moving more than documents. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is we have X number of terabytes, and we want to move it into, the cloud. And it's a blanket statement. And as you start to pick apart, and I bet how your friend and others would look at it is, well, do you want to move everything? Is it out of date? Where do you want to put it? How is it to be used beyond just movement into the cloud? And of course, if it goes beyond documents, then it's maybe going to be structured or unstructured data that would live in multiple places as opposed to just one. And it adds a layer of complexity to be able to discover and then articulate what the plan is. But the outcome being people don't find out-of-date content. They can then use it maybe in a more fluent way. And it is just better because it may be a smaller project. If we don't bring 10 terabytes, we bring 1. And of course, the outcome is going to be different. But I think it's the role of the architect that really says, I see what you want to do, but let me question a few things because the technical possibilities are usually endless. The realities of what you really want to do for your end goal, let's scope it so that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, you reminded me of a story about 15, 16 years ago. A solutions architect was working on a project somewhere else in a firm where I was working at the time. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but we were chatting about the project because he did some work in some of my areas as well. And he mentioned an acronym they use, which was SSAC. And SSAC stood for System Should Automatically Know. Because people who would come up with designs and ideas for how the system would work, the system, would be, when I come in the morning, I turn my screen on and the system should automatically know what's changed overnight that I need to pay attention to. And then when I come to the screen, the system should automatically do this. And he then had to listen to all of these SSAC requirements, which back in the days of on-premises and local PCs, you just didn't have AI and the level of recommendation engine to be able to do these things, but to be able to use a couple of other levers, such as time to market, cost, reliability risk, of saying, we can build all of these things for you, but it's going to cost $5 million. Or it's going to stop running in 3 months because you don't have enough data storage to keep track of every market movement for every stock everywhere in the world, even if you don't own it. Being able to be practical and get back to what is the end state that you need to be at? Where do you want to be a year from now? Where do you want to be 3 years from now? And how do we put the tools and solutions in place to do that? I think it really requires, though, it's for the right person, it's a great role because you need to be insanely curious about not just what's in your immediate area of expertise, but expand that domain to learn about what's going on in parallel solutions. Like how are people solving similar needs inside of Salesforce or at Google or with Amazon or all the other players that are out there? Because no two customers are alike and no two customers have the exact same mix of software solutions. So being able to understand the major players, the patterns and practices that are out there and staying on top of it, for the right person, it's just a tremendously rewarding opportunity.
Until there's, I guess, artificial information architects, I think it's time to turn to our Adelaide Microsoft IT Pro community group, and that is Brett Moffet, Matt Cline, and Andrew Young. Let's see what they have to say about the architect role in crafting solutions for Microsoft 365. Welcome to the Intrazone. Brett, Matt, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's go through a quick roundtable if they don't already know all of what you do, starting with Brett. Brett, what do you do? And give us a synopsis of maybe your latest project that you've worked on.
So I work for a company called Cireson. We make plugins for System Center Service Manager, which is an IT service management platform. So for your service desk. So a lot of the stuff that we're working on at the moment is integration into Teams as well. So we can actually pull information directly from IT service management into Teams as well. So we can make comments or look up KB articles or take chats that we've been having and taking them directly into an IT service management framework there as well. So starting to integrate into that collaboration into an IT service management platform.
Excellent. It sounds like a nice blend of information and actual control, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So Matt, enterprise architecture at data. Do you say data £3 or data *3 or data #3?
Well, Matt needs to take himself off mute first because he can't work out how to use a microphone. Have you used Teams before, Matt? Just putting it out.
Never used it before. That's hence the problem. So data 3. I think the pound is silent. So I work with customers around a lot of stuff. My background's heavily within the Microsoft stack. I've been doing it for a lot longer than what I care to mention out loud.
Whatever's healthy,
Yeah, exactly. I come from an exchange and identity background, back from MS Mail days. So that gives you an idea of how long I've been doing this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I am working on a reference architecture for a global manufacturing company around, strangely enough, Defender for Endpoint, which is the next topic that I'm talking about within our user group. So I do a lot of M365 security stuff, and also Azure.
So you're our protector. Let's phrase it around. We and data in this conversation is safe because of Matt.
Well, sure, we'll go with that.
And I like that you joined with the Clippy background.
Clippy.
I love it. You know what? That someone needs to make the Merlin one. That's when I saw these come out. And there was the Blues background, which you've got, which I love. And there's the solitaire one. I was just absolutely heartbroken that there was no Merlin. But Clippy's just as good. That's okay.
And Andrew, as a solution specialist, I know a lot of your focus is around Microsoft Learn, training certifications. But what is your role at Subnet, and what are some of the things you've been doing recently?
My tenure is a bit, under half of my cohorts here. I came into the IT space a bit later on in my career. So after learning a bit about Windows Server, Windows Client, and all that, when Office 365 came around, it was kind of pushed to me, hey, you should learn this. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So learn the things and then just kept learning. So now I'm pretty much just pushing out the whole concept of getting people into Office 365 or Microsoft 365, identifying technical debt in spaces, highlighting what processes can be done better or maybe even automated in some instances. Just overall getting businesses up to speed or up to date, catching up with the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I think the role, just the way that you defined it, is probably one of the more important things for just awareness campaigns where, what do you have? What are you trying to accomplish? Let me show you some things you might not have seen, and being able to take that into consideration of what they're actually trying to accomplish. I'm just guessing is a big part of what you do.
Pretty much, yeah.
So starting back with Brett, with this notion of whether it's got the right acronym, what was your preferred one? The SCCM?
SCCM, that's the one.
Yeah. So whether we use the right acronym or we throw a couple of terrible new brand names at you, I think in this day and age, the thing that's the most new is just what do IT departments have to manage? It's on premises, it's maybe in the cloud, or it's a blend of both. Mm-hmm. And if you were to kind of put your best practices guidance on, or the main thing that people need to consider if they're moving into hybrid, or just they're moving into taking advantage of some of the new technologies, no matter where they're deployed, what do you tell people these days when it comes to the SCCM-ishness of the world that you live in, that they can kind of glean no matter how they're deployed?
Yeah, so System Center as a whole is really, I'm biased towards System Center. I love it. It's where I started my career as SMS and then SCCM and now Endpoint Manager. So bring all of the System Center pieces together to actually build out process. And, for years, ITIL and IT service management and so forth have been talking about continuous improvement and having a service catalog that IT can show that the service that they're providing their business. And everyone's kind of fobbed it off and haven't really put much investment into their service catalog or know what they actually do from IT as a service with inside a business. And now that we're moving to these sort of hybrid environments, we're so many new ways of being able to do business. And I think especially over the last 2 years that all of a sudden we had that snap change of, okay, the way we work and the way we communicate is going to change fundamentally now and forever. It's important to start with good process, know what our policies are from a government and restrictions sort of perspective of what we have to report. But then what are our processes? How does a new user come on board? How do we offboard somebody? How do we promote someone's security? And especially with a lot of government departments at the moment, there's this big push of what we here in Australia call the Essential 8. So we have our cybersecurity division, and they've got 8 key metrics to be able to hit, to be able to make sure that your organization is secure. So things like no local admin passwords and so forth. So knowing what our policies are that we need to get to, what our processes are for providing that service to our customers, and then actually implementing it and picking the right technology for that process. But a lot of companies, unfortunately, are putting the product before the process and then having to shoehorn things into those products. We've got a lot of choice nowadays, but if we don't know what our processes are, we don't know what it is that we're actually servicing our customers with, we can't make good, educated decisions into whatever product we're going to put things behind. So organizations really focusing on what that process should be within inside an organization, I think is really important.
Matt, if off the back of that, there is this notion of you got to plan, you got to know your processes and what the business requires so that you can, before you actually go and push some dials and buttons to get things configured, there's also the content side of things. And I don't just mean documents because I'm the SharePoint guy, but mail and mailboxes, calendar, just getting somebody to a new space like the cloud. I know you had a recent win where you moved a lot of mailboxes for the government, and I can let you explain that a little bit more. I'd love to hear that one use case in that example, but I'm also maybe just for the broader user group interest, if they're not a government entity, that notion of what should people think about when they move to the cloud, or if they're already invested in the cloud, taking advantage of that next workload. What does that mean from maybe the example that you can share, but also that broader notion of migrating content, the to-dos and the not to-dos?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing, and like, it's really just remove the technology from the equation. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say when we're talking about a technology project. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to migrate, one mailbox or, 100,000 mailboxes, or whether you're trying to move, your on-prem SharePoint farm into SharePoint Online, or whatever the case may be. You've got to answer what am I actually trying to get out of this at the end? So what's the business trying to get out of it? Not the technology. If you're driving down that, we're doing this because it's shiny, or we're doing this because we need, we need to get the new latest and greatest whatever, that project will fail. Like, absolutely 100% guarantee it will fail. You need to really be clear on what your outcomes are going to be. What do I actually need to get out of this project? Now, that also helps with, all the requirements gathering to begin with. And, I think there's that fine line between over-architecting and under-architecting things. And when I'm not going to jump too far into, the whole agile mindset, but, you need to get that right fit for getting all of your business requirements done, so that you've got a really clear idea of what success looks like, what done looks like, and everything that goes along the way. And as you do that, your project kind of just falls in place. The other thing that can't be understated is organizational change management. And it is absolutely key. So one of the things that we did with government, so the project specifically was around migrating all of SA Gov's mailboxes from an on-prem private cloud Exchange 2013 environment to Exchange Online. So that was 28 agencies, which have effectively 28 business units. Every single one of them has different business requirements, different outcomes, different drivers, different everything. Now, it was not a simple project. In fact, actually, it was a simple project. It was a really, really simple project from a technology point of view. Like, it's just, here's the PowerShell scripts, here's the things I need to do, here's the times I'm going to do it, done. The thing that was actually complicated and the thing that made it really successful was the change management. We had sessions run with executive assistants so that they knew what to expect on the day of migration. So when their exec came to them and went, the whole thing's ruined and I can't do anything, or they can't get access to it because of every migration I've done, the one person you don't want to make mad is an EA. Like, you don't make them... Don't put them in a pilot and don't make them angry. Just make sure that white glove service. The exec's usually fine. It's their PA or EA that you just want to make sure has the smoothest ride possible. And then we'd run sessions with each individual agency service desk, so they knew what kind of calls to expect. We'd give them FAQs. We'd give them, our lessons learned from the field. What did we see in pilot? How did we troubleshoot all these things that we saw? What are the repeatable things that you can do here? And then also just creating, a one pager for users. You're going to be migrated on date X. And again, it doesn't matter what the workload is. If there's a user impact, here's what's going to happen. Here's the impact. Here's what you need to do. If you've got a problem, call this person, and don't make it a big, it's not War and Peace, and don't expect even in a technical, an organization that's got really high technical literacy, don't assume that user knows that product as well as you do, because they may have the intelligence or the ability to, but it's not their day-to-day job. They just want their email to work, or they want to be able to get access to their data in SharePoint, or they want to be able to make a phone call in Teams, or they want to be able to do whatever the case may be. And if you're interrupting that flow, then you need to be able to give them something to ease that transition along. So I think those are the things that really are the most important thing. And I've said it to a lot of people in the past. It's, if you're still having conversations with customers, clients, and I do mean internal as well as external facing, if you're having conversations about technology, you're actually having the wrong conversation, because you need to be having the business conversation. What does the business want to get out of this? What does success look like for the business and for the end users?
I can see the through line between what Brett was talking about, where if you don't plan, that you're screwed when it comes to the process. If you don't do any requirements gathering, then you're kind of screwed if you don't really put the right plan together. The thing I really liked, and I've heard it from a number of consultants more recently, and from one of our, folks that I've talked to a couple of times on the podcast, is that notion of focused on outcomes. You're right about the don't, pay attention to the shiny object, learn about it, but, don't jump to it. But do the right requirements gathering with the right outcomes. And where I think it might lead into what I'd like to ask Andrew is effective communications throughout. I couldn't agree with you more. And if in that part that maybe, Andrew, where you focus a lot on the change management aspects, obviously that comes with good communication. You need to know what you're talking about, and they need to understand what you're talking about. But I wanted to ask kind of a two-part, a little more pointed question, just to get your sense of what you have worked a lot with and kind of what bubbles up as something that you really like. So the question is, what is an application that everybody knows about that is your favorite app? And what is another app that nobody knows about that you think everybody should know about?
The first part, I think it's pretty obvious. Everyone knows Microsoft Teams by now, in the past year of its exponential growth. So I think I saw it was 250 million active users daily. With that tool to make us all connected, it was really helpful during, we had less impact being in South Australia compared to the Eastern Seaboard. But for those that needed to work from home, it was critical to get them up and running with the Teams platform, to keep their meetings going and introducing collaboration at a very expedited rate. So a lot of people
what was the thing that was, besides just turn your video on and chat, not that you have to have your video on, but what was kind of the hardest thing to implement it maybe at scale for people to learn about Microsoft Teams?
Overall, I guess, getting out there that this is what we need to do now. We've got a very shortened frame of time to get everyone on board and across, I guess, the basics of the product. A lot of it was already after the fact. So we'd already had clients sent home to work. So they were calling in, and we were just haphazardly kind of just getting them across the line so that they can get on with their work. So there was pretty much no change management, no user adoption. It was to make it happen as soon as possible. And I guess over the year, with easing restrictions and going back in again for lockdowns, I guess at this stage, I think everyone is either across the product itself and how to use it. But there's still heaps of stuff in Teams and what it can do that they probably haven't been shown. It's just that it's a means to get everyone working as a tool now. In terms of something that not many know, from a non-IT pro point of view, there'd be a lot in. Some may travel into the little waffle menu with the 9 dots and they'll go, what is all this?
Whoa.
I think a really good one would be Power Automate, or formerly known as Flow, just in what it can do in between all your different apps and services in 365. So being able to automate all sorts of just day-to-day menial tasks, like, you've received an email, you can file it for you. You can take the attachment, store it somewhere else so that you can get to it later, so that you've got it filed nicely or however you like. Just cutting down the time spent manually doing those tasks is pretty valuable. And then the further integrations into like Power Apps and the rest of the Power Platform, your Power Virtual Agents as well, just giving the no-code, low-code to just anyone to play with these tools, because they're all included to a degree in your licensing when you've got. So I would suggest have it play. Maybe not in production, but where possible, have it play.
Chicken, come on, no, do it. Commit to prod.
Are we not bold
Nobody
in
needs to know
Adelaide?
that.
It's Friday, it's 4 p.m. Just write it to prod. It'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen?
I know there's some other partner apps that integrate into Teams that I don't think many people are aware of that I think are very useful. I think one of them is a product that we make called Ticket, and it's a really, really small service management ticketing system for people that don't want a full-blown IT service management system, and it's fully Teams-based. So it's completely built into Teams. And also here in South Australia, another company that have a Teams app that I think is really, really innovative is Team Gauge. And it's a HR survey type solution. So you can start to get feedback from your end users and your staff about how they're feeling about the organization and that general sort of HR feedback. And it was sort of ahead of its time because, most people are like, oh, no, I like face-to-face type meetings with people and so forth and so on. Then all of a sudden, the last 2 years hit and everyone's like, oh, actually, this works really well. And it's a great way to be able to get that anonymous feedback as well as direct feedback up into HR and really see how people are feeling about the organization. And it's all directly built into Teams. So again, you can have those discussions and then move straight into how do we fix this from a HR and a company perspective? So if you haven't checked out Team Gauge, definitely check them out. They're Adelaide based and really, really good product. Great way of being able to get that feedback back into your organization.
I think on that topic, like we've come out, we're coming out and in of global pandemics and lockdowns and everything else. Like obviously the state in, New South Wales at the moment is just not great. But the thing that we've been exceptionally lucky in Adelaide in terms of lockdown, that that just general feeling of isolation of the pandemic side and not actually having as much human contact. And I say this as a raging introvert who just loved being in lockdown. Well, I loved it for about the first 2 weeks, and then afterwards I went, I might go out with my mates for a beer. That'd be great.
Lightly extroverted every once in a while.
But I kind of can't do that. So, but there's that component of it, and I think when you psychology is one of my hobbies. So I think when you look at it, when people start getting very insular in their thought and they can't express that to a coworker or someone face to face, it actually, you start to fester on those things, and being able to actually have those conversations as well. And the thing that we've seen more than anything, and Mark, you said it, Teams turn your video on. I think even if you're in a hoodie and a pair of tracksuit pants, turn your video on. I know that, I don't have bad hair days because there's not much left to be bad anymore. But I think having video on and all of the great stuff that has come around with the absolute reliance on video conferencing applications, whether that be, Teams or FaceTime or WhatsApp or Signal or, Zoom, everything like that has really helped people keep connected. And that bigger story around unified comms has really hit home in a lot of organizations. Like before it was we want to use UC because telephony is cheaper, not because of video. No one, people cared, but it was less of an important part. And, remote work now and talent acquisition as well. If you think about it, the globe is now your oyster for talent acquisition because remote working is the new normal. So it starts making things a lot more interesting across those things. So all of these applications like Viva and TeamGauge and stuff like that actually allows you to see how people are doing in a good way, not in a creepy Big Brother privacy violation way, is really, really great, because HR having that information is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing, because then they can start doing things like initiatives around things like Viva with Headspace and curating content to be able to say, hey, look, we've actually noticed that people aren't doing great at the moment. Here's some things that you might want to try. There's these Headspace things, and we know you can't go outside, but you can a bit. So going for a walk or doing this, or, get the dog out, or, go pat the cat or something, or say hello to your neighbor, or, well, don't say hello to your neighbor, but, something like that is incredibly important. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that what we've seen over the last years has been not just an evolution in the way we work, but the way that we're delivering technology as well. And the consumption of that technology. I don't think anyone expected people to go from, zero to, I at the time had 2 weeks to get a lot of people working from home. And I mean a lot, like 80,000 people working from home. It was just an incredible uplift in how we've had to do this. And I think IT and the platforms that are available to us have just really come on in leaps and bounds. And it's just breathtaking to see not just what's been able to be happen, but how the longevity of that is actually going to play out in terms of how we work now.
Yeah, I hope it sticks to some degree, partially because I think there's a little bit of introvert in everybody, and it's nice to just choose, hey, I don't want to go into the office, but I do have things to do and I have people to meet, and it's going to be a great experience. I also really like what you said in the notion of, that the phrase, the world is flat, and there's a lot of talent that doesn't have to live or move or relocate, almost to the betterment of your company, because now you've got representation in a new city or in a new state or whatever that might be. I really like that. And back to Andrew, just what you mentioned around Power Automate, the tools, not just for IT, but even for end users. I will be very clear. I was a little bit afraid of Flow at first. I never really dabbled in workflow and SharePoint to any degree. So I just kind of thought the old mental model of workflow was not for me. To take advantage of somebody deployed it, but not to build it. But I remember the first Flow that I built because somebody sent me a link to the recipe that said, you have a document in OneDrive and you want to post to Teams. Now we can do it a little bit more elegantly with a new feature. But that Flow is a really easy one for me to plug in. Yep, I want it in my OneDrive and I want it to post, with this message or whatever. And then to use that as something I could then drop from a drop down. I would agree. It's kind of a hidden tool, and the hidden part of it, which I know you probably share a lot with your, in the training session or when people reference it is not a hard tool anymore. It's not for everybody, but it bleeds into that I can do it, the no code, low code, almost no code. So I commend you for bringing that one up, because I think that probably could be a scary one for people to kind of stare at. But the what you can do with Power Automate, or if you knew it in Flow, has a lot of capabilities. Yeah, awesome.
I think a lot on that as well, and I'll touch back onto what some of the stuff Brett was saying around process. And I think a takeaway from that is, I'll put this a little bit more delicately than what I usually do to my customers. Even is you got to remember that a crap process, if you automate it, is just a crap process automated. It doesn't fix the problem just because you've put automation around it. It kind of ties back into what I was saying around getting your requirements right. But a crap process automated is still a crap process. It doesn't fix the problem. So
I have one. I want to ask Brett, is that true? I thought Intune had a crap fixer filter where it would take a crap
not
process.
So much. Not yet. Maybe next version. Maybe.
Crap. Oh, I mean, sorry. From an Interzone perspective, thank you all for sharing. Always great, obviously. For me, just the thing I love about the Interzone is I get to hear about things that I usually don't know much about, or am reminded that, yes, that is actually a valid way to think about it. I really do appreciate, of course, fun to do a little Interzone in person.
Nice. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks Mark.
So much. Yeah.
Well, Mark, it was great that you were able to gather all of that. That's really interesting to hear from Brett and Matt and Andrew, and hopefully you get to go down south of the equator yourself sometime soon here. It's time for the events section of the Interzone. If there is an event relating to SharePoint, your intranet, employee experience, or anything else in the broad world of Microsoft 365, we will spotlight that for you here. The world is still in a pandemic, but we have some optimists who are scheduling events going on. And let's take a look at some of those.
Yeah, and I thought just one small caveat as we're tracking and noting a lot of the events that are coming up. There's obviously a lot of subject to change. Some of these that we are talking about have been postponed, and these are the new dates. So we always have links in the show notes that you can always click into and ensure if you are interested in one of these events or multiple events, just make sure to check on their dates and if anything has fluctuated. The first one is planned to be in person. This is Enterprise Connect. This is going to be in Orlando, Florida, March 21st through the 24th. And this is an event that targets both communications and collaborations across a lot of different types of people that would attend. People that are decision makers, that are looking at challenges for their companies around migrating to the cloud, getting people ready for hybrid work, and all of the new tooling and new experiences that people want for their customers, their end customers who might be their employees as well. So there's a lot of focus on customer experience and more at Enterprise Connect.
Also happening that week, Teams Nation 2022. That'll be a virtual event or a physical event. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, this one was a really great event. It's very focused from the community, all about Microsoft Teams from all the different angles. And it's a great lead that runs the event, and you'll see a lot of great speakers. This is one where we have been tracking what's going on with Collab Days in Cologne, and we hope that this will be in person in March. There is not a specific date that's yet to be announced, but there also is not yet an announcement about anything around a postponement. So keep track of that if you live in that area in Germany. Keep track of what's going on with Collab Days Cologne.
Document Strategy Forum 22. This will be a live event focused on content management coming up April 4th to 6th in Chicago, and Microsoft will be sponsoring and driving a lot of the content there. Also happening the same week, M365 Collaboration Conference. That'll be in person back in Las Vegas, April 5th to 7th, 2022. So if you missed it last year, don't lament. You can make it to Las Vegas and hang out with all the folks from the SharePoint community and beyond.
And if you want to get a little bit more focused, towards the end of April, April 27th through the 29th, is the AIM conference, AIM 2022. This will be in Denver, Colorado. And before we jump to the next one, Chris, I bet you have a little something to say about this one.
So AIM is always a big show for us. We're bringing a fairly large contingent from Microsoft to focus on everything that's happened since the last AIM conference, which is over 2 years ago. And we're really excited to be able to hang out with the AIM community, which is an experience. It's equally animated, but different from the SharePoint community. So really encourage you, if you're going to be in the Denver area, to check it out April 27th to 29th.
The next event is SEF 2022. This is an in-person event in Sweden, and this is one that was planned for January of 2022, and it's now been moved to May 4th through the 5th. So if you're in Sweden and you want in-person training across all things Microsoft 365, it's to be a great event. And there are 2 or 3 of us that are actually going to be joining virtually to provide either day of or some of the day's keynotes or some of the closing notes, because we'll be at a beginning of our day, catching them at the end of their day. But it's to be a great event, and there's a lot of great content, especially if you want to attend in person and are in Sweden. Highly recommend SEF 2022. The last one is the 365 EduCon that's going to be in Seattle. This was previously the SP Fest, and they've just put this on the books recently. So this is May 9th to the 12th. We're just starting to lean in with what the content will be. I believe that Jeff Teeper will be supporting a keynote for the first day of content after the workshops. And always a great event with the SharePoint Fest Now 365 EduCon team. Like Chris mentioned, if you have an event that you would like to advertise on the Intrazone, it's free of cost, and we just love to track anything and everything to do with Microsoft 365 training events, specific about products or spanning the whole portfolio. We want to thank our guests, Brett, Matt, and Andrew from the Aussie group down there in Adelaide, for sharing their IT insights all the way from down under. We encourage you to check out our show page for links to all of what was discussed today and more. Go to aka.ms/theintrazone. Please send us your questions and feedback for the SharePoint team. If there's any point of contact that we can help make, you can reach us at the intrazone@microsoft.com or via Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000. Remember, your word is our bond to you to do the best podcast that we can, and it really helps if you rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow the show wherever you get your tech podcast that you absolutely can't do without and love. Thank you so much for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and this has been The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Aussie architected intelligent intranet.